All right, we're live with Cody Willard, Joe Anderson, and Sanasi,
And Bryce.
and Bryce. Bryce is back there, or back there. Wait, there.
Yeah.
There he is. So,
And
what's going
Cabana
on, everybody?
Crypto hosting.
Oh yes, it's me, the Cabana Man. How is everyone this fine Wednesday?
You know, if you're in New Mexico, you call it Cabana, not Cabana.
I have realized that over the past year or two.
Because in Spanish, it's Cabana. And it's a Spanish word, I'm pretty sure.
So I unknowingly pronounced it correctly.
So,
Cabana.
There we go.
Cabana. And Shinazi, do you have a squiggly on the S there? At
Yeah,
the
there
front?
is a squiggly there.
Or is that a new
Correct.
feature?
No, that's the actual Turkish spelling. It's
Yeah, I've
S
never
with S with a dot underneath, and it basically corresponds to the SH sound.
Yeah, Shinazi.
Shinasi, yes.
Shinazi.
What'd you call him?
Way back when I told everyone on the call my pronunciation guide to for my name, and I said she and Nazi, and then I said I'm neither, so that way it sticks, and it's not Nazi but it's Nasi, so Shinasi.
Shinazi.
I
Yes.
identify as, but yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Or do not identify as. Yeah.
Shinazi identifies as Shinazi. Why do you disappear like that, Cabana?
Testing my video. I'm looking at YouTube right now because it has not been the best, but it actually looks okay.
All right, good. Now you look good.
Cabana's all clean shaven today.
Yeah, he's all handsome over there.
I'm
huh?
headed south. I'm, getting ready for the sunshine on my face. Can't wait. So
All right, you guys want to talk some space stuff? Space stuff. Space stuff.
How about just like a big crypto thing? What's your take on this BlackRock ETF thing? I mean, I'm of the mind that like they've been waiting for the perfect entity, and BlackRock will go hand in hand with the government, and that's it. It's done. They've only lost one, I think, application for one. What's your take on that? Oh, real quick.
Wait, who's they that have been waiting? The government? The SEC?
My opinion, yes.
Okay. I didn't know what you meant by they. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, like we've had like Van Eck and Schilbert and all those guys try it, but all of a sudden BlackRock does it, and they put one little disclaimer in their application, and it sounds like, oh, that's all it's going to take. So just
Well,
funny.
look, I mean, clearly BlackRock is a 800-pound gorilla that is long time been like when the government bailed out the giant banks in 2008, the Republicans and Democrats together, bipartisan bailout for the richest, corruptest people on the planet. When they did that,
all of the
BlackRock
socialists.
is part of that. That BlackRock is involved. They like when the government is going to do something or BlackRock's going to do something, governments together. Like we're not China, but the Republican Democrat regime. The only reason they're not communist is because the Constitution of the United States keeps them from being so. And BlackRock would be like the equivalent of Ant Financial, which is inside of Alibaba, and the communist government owns it and does whatever they tell them to do. Ant does. And BlackRock is sort of the same way. So it's actually possible, I suppose, that the government, the SEC, was like, hey, BlackRock, now's the time. Can you please do a Bitcoin ETF? If you Google it, I don't know if you want to do it, Cabana, but there is a how it started, how's it going meme of BlackRock 5 years ago. Say the CEO, what's his name? Schwartz? Was that Black?
Larry Fink?
Fink saying that Bitcoin is stupid and it'll never work. And then now the how is it going is, well, BlackRock's launching a Bitcoin ETF. Woohoo! So, like it's all, I've been saying for probably the last 2 years, ever since Anthony Scaramucci and his cohorts got into the Bitcoin crypto wagon. They jumped on the wagon. That it's inevitable that the government's going to allow crypto to exist. And they are doing it. I still don't understand, as we've talked on these calls recently, where the average crypto investor, junkie, cryptonaut is like all upset that the SEC is prosecuting fraud in the crypto world. And I'm like, no, that actually makes, like, it's a good thing. You want fraud prosecuted. You want the government to regulate and follow their rules. And Coinbase and Binance did not follow the rules of exchanges and asset peddling entities, and they need to be prosecuted. So, like, that makes me more confident that the United States will be the safest and best crypto investing place on the planet. It doesn't make me less excited about the United States as crypto world. I mean, the United States is always the cleanest shirt. We have by far the least corrupt government and banking system. My prior comments about Republican, Democrat banking bailouts notwithstanding.
And there we have it. So, moving on then. Is there another topic you wanted to discuss? Perhaps transacting, or are we doing that
Yeah,
next?
you know what? We're doing it. I got to figure out how to. I got to go on to this Slack. Just give me a second. You guys talk about space news for a second. I'm going to pull up what the plan is today. Joe Anderson, right before we got on screen, and before I was like on the screen either, he didn't even know I was here, and he was like, "Cody's been calling us to show us how to transact SKTLs. I wonder if he'll bother doing that today." And I heard him. So I'm doing it today. I wasn't going to until he said that. And then I'm like, no, that's a challenge. I'm stepping up.
Thank you, Joe.
Oh, yeah. Hey, anytime I can stab somebody in the back, and yeah, not good. Anyway, it's all for the greater good. It's all for the greater.
Great. Is there any space news we need to hit on?
Well, Dan posted this article in the Slack channel. It's all about day and night. There's a section in here on the FAA's role for tracking space debris passed by Congress. So I'm going to look for that.
Look, it's actually
There we go.
The whole reason. Let's just remind everybody, the reason SKTLs exists is because I'm entering the studio. I'll have to mute this. I got a speaker too. Reason why we started SKTLs is because the space debris crisis is a crisis. There are millions or now up to billions of pieces of space debris. There are thousands, if not hundreds, of abandoned satellites. There's like from fragments this small to things the size of my desk that are in orbit around the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour. Is that the right number?
17,000. Yeah.
Is that the right number? All right. 17,000 miles per hour, twice the speed of a bullet, zooming around up there. And if they collide, it creates more space debris. And the more stuff we send up there, the more stuff there's opportunity to create more space debris. And we end up with this crisis. And the FAA, NASA, I don't care what government entity, they all need to be involved in figuring out. Maybe not all of them, because then they'll just get all bureaucratic. But someone needs to be in charge besides SKTLs. The SKTL token is dedicated to cleaning up space debris. We donate 10% of our fund. There's a token. There's a fund that has tens of millions, 100 million tokens in it that we donate 10% of it every year to space debris cleaning entities. And that's why we're here. And so this is what, Dan's talking about. The FAA is actually trying to figure out how to start tracking some of the debris and the traffic so that we don't have collisions. It should be the Department of Transportation, the DOT. No? Yeah, maybe. Hey, can you let me in on the phone? Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'll turn this one off.
While you're doing that, have any of our winners accepted their coins and gotten them transferred over into wallets yet. And I'm looking at a couple accounts that have over 2 million tokens in it, but I don't know if anybody's talked to them or not.
Cody, you're muted, just FYI.
Daniel will need to confirm.
Oh,
Daniel will need to confirm.
It's the Wizard of Oz.
there we go.
Voice of God.
All right, unmute yourself again, Cody, and it should be good.
Oh, you're muted.
Okay, now deleted. I did not do that.
Broadcast suicide.
Yep.
Oh, there he is.
All right. Well, wrong one.
How do I share my screen on my phone?
It's hidden down there somewhere. One of the buttons near the bottom, I believe, that might say present.
Yeah, it doesn't say. I got Mike, Cam, Chat, and Lee.
It's
No,
like
that's
a bad
settings.
science fiction movie.
It's a good thing if we were doing this on Fox, the producer would be freaking out behind the scenes.
No, we'd be in commercial right now.
We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
Let me see if I can.
Figure out how to get me to share my screen. Price, ladies and gentlemen, he has a golf glove on.
Sorry.
Glove.
They can't see it.
Golf glove. Yeah.
This is what happens with live television.
Yes.
And the other one.
Only
Hi,
thing
guys.
worse. It'd be worse if this was radio.
Yeah. Do I sound okay? I don't sound like God anymore.
A little bit.
No.
Can you turn
I
the-
mean, here, I can fix that. Hold on.
Better.
Yes.
There you go.
All right. Well, look, I would literally, Joe Anderson was going to show people how to buy Skytles, but I can't figure out how to share my screen on StreamYard from a phone, only from the computer. And I don't think that's going to be very productive. I've never actually done MetaMask on my computer. I've always just used my phone. And
I think this is just a big secret that you don't want to share with anybody.
I do.
That's
Joe Anderson was talking about me behind my back before I got on, saying I wasn't going to do it. So I feel the challenge. I really want to do it.
You were in the green room for like 3 seconds.
I don't think
Yes.
he knew that though. Yeah, Cabana, we'll have to figure out. I'm going to have to download MetaMask to my computer, I guess, because there is no way to share a screen on the phone on StreamYard, apparently.
Alrighty.
Yeah, I don't know. All
I
right,
don't
so let's
think I've
talk some
ever-
space news instead.
Yeah, okay.
Dan, Geraci, you missed it. We just talked about your FAA tracking space debris link, but what else has been in the news? No
Yeah,
big blow-ups, no. Has anything? Rocket Lab launched. Oh yeah, over the weekend, Rocket Lab launched. What did they launch?
The suborbital hypersonic.
Oh, that's right. They did a hypersonic test.
Name of the rocket.
Dan
Yeah.
Geraci, can you talk to us about hypersonics and the potential for hypersonics
Well,
to become it's a
hyper-
defense thing. Let's be clear
It's-
that this is
it's a
you
big
know, the
defense thing.
military industrial complex
Yep.
grayish area, but you know, like we do, like I do want the United States government to defend me against China and Russian missiles. Hypersonics could help do that. Dan, talk about it, please.
Hypersonics are, are very revolutionary. It's something that we've been well behind in the development of, almost inexcusably far behind. Russia and China especially. A lack of investment and funding at the Defense Department level. The good news is that, when we throw money at things, we can move quickly. We're now in much better shape, but hypersonics are literally, it's the ability to move at multiple times the speed of sound, and to really reduce the time. And in practical terms, it's basically being able to launch a missile that travels extremely low, potentially below radar, but so fast that it's nearly impossible to intercept. We're talking about literally a few minutes, as opposed to 15 for a typical ICBM type of a launch.
ICBM, it costs you $1.
Intercontinental ballistic missiles. So the traditional, weapon of choice for destruction. So the ability to put a nuke on a hypersonic means that, you're pretty much dead before you figure out what to do. And so what's happening is this race, and we're hoping that some of us anyway are hoping that it takes the path of the nuclear race to where it's a mutually assured destruction environment where people don't tend to use it for those reasons. But at the same time, you can deliver conventional warheads. You can, do anything that we can do today with missiles. The problem, and one of the interesting things, is that while it might be harder or hardest to defend against when you're 5 or 10,000 miles away and you're looking for something that's moving at incredible speeds and very low, you can see them from space as well. And the notion that orbital defense against things like this, which is nothing new, but now we're talking about, being able to target a missile from above as it's moving across the face of the earth, does have some advantages. One of which is if you're a few hundred miles up with a platform to defend yourself, it's a few hundred-mile shot, as opposed to thousands of miles across to get to these. And, it's all about targeting and timing and all of that good stuff that goes into the mechanics of it. Companies like Lockheed are very far along with it. We've created some really interesting fuels for propulsion for hypersonics. That's a big area of private investment and research right now, is hypersonic propellant and thrust, general thrust capability. So it's the next leading edge of weapons.
Dan, why has the United States not been actively developing this while Russia and China have actually been showing in the last year, showing their hypersonic?
We were, but we were not that fast. And frankly, I blame both military leadership, but especially leadership at the highest levels of the country for not, seeing those countries as the big threats that they are. This goes back before Ukraine and all of this stuff happened. These things were under development, and we were working on it too, but we weren't putting the money into it that we are now. And we have to keep in mind that when we research things, there's a longer process and a multi-layered process to doing things and funding them here than there is in a very flat environment like China or even Russia with all of its headaches now. They don't have to go through any approval system. They just say, go build this, and
Putin or Xi goes, go. And that's the approval system.
That's it. Yeah. So I think we're far more competitive now, but in the conversations I've had with, both Air Force and Space Force people, that's the one thing I've heard lamented more than anything else in the last 2 years, is how far behind we are generally with regard to space defense, and specifically with regard to hypersonics. So Dan, I think we're closing the gap. I think there's a lot we don't know, frankly, that we have to. At least that's my hope.
Is there a chance that Rocket Lab ends up with a new substantial revenue stream by doing hypersonics for defense and for the government?
I think those companies are going to continue to be the transportation industry I think, for putting a lot of this stuff up, which is really what Rocket Lab's doing. I think deployment. I think when you bring commercial companies into the actual, conflict position, then you're running a really big risk of those companies being targets. So if nothing else, they're going to be a good way to get stuff into orbit quickly, which everybody knows is part of the agenda that the government has, especially Space Force, for using private launchers to put up as much as possible, especially in a time of crisis. But I think they're going to stop short, because that's a Rubicon that you don't want to cross, especially with private companies, not to mention the security risks of them knowing more than they need to know, other than the payload's been integrated, press the button and put it up there, and we'll take it from there. So
have you ever heard of Kratos? I hope I'm saying it right. Kratos Defense and Security.
Yeah, it's another company named after a god of one culture or another.
Yeah. And they're now that you mention it, their new single rocket motor, solid rocket motor, is called Zeus. Stock was up 15% today. It is they did a successful test of their Zeus rocket built by Aerojet Rocketdyne. Who tried to buy Aerojet Rocketdyne and couldn't do it? Was it Lockheed a few months ago? Someone tried to buy them, and the government.
Yeah, it was Lockheed. Yeah.
Yeah, the government's going to let Live and PGA merge, but they wouldn't let someone buy.
There is no logic to the playbook the government uses for that. I think it's more political than it is logical. So
imagine Republicans and Democrats doing something for politics and not rationality.
Gasp. But the thing with solid rockets, by the way, solid fuel, which is literally that. It's a much more. It's not obviously gas or liquid like we typically use to launch rockets. It burns very consistently and evenly, and when it's done, it's done. In recent years, and so we could never use it because you could never throttle the rocket up or down with solid fuel. In recent years now, solid rocket fuels have been developed that are throttleable. There's a mouthful. So that you can throttle them up and down, turn them off, turn them on, which is, a panacea. If you're in the launch business, because they're much safer fuels to burn. And now that we have that, there are companies that have even developed, solid fuels with a hypersonic capability. So that brings the two conversations together, and that's of tremendous interest, because these would make launches much safer. You get a much cleaner, more consistent burn, and they can burn all kinds of different fuels, including aluminum as an example. So that's mixed, in a certain way to give you really high propulsion. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be where the future is. I think we get away from a lot of the volatile propellants for things like solid and for electric, which is going to be heavily used in low Earth orbit for moving stuff around. These little electric thrusters that are just amazing.
I listened to a podcast the other day called Planet Money. It's by, I think it was the BBC. And they did an episode on innovation and the economy. And first segment, they talked about, I'm shifting gears here for a moment. They talked about that somewhat, I guess I'm shifting gears. Anyway, they talked about how this scientist at Merck was trying to do a bunch of research. Sanatsi, you'll probably appreciate this anecdote. The guy was ordered a mainframe computer before they had any mainframe computers at Merck. And it needed a 220 or 240, whatever it is, volt to plug into the wall, and Merck didn't have it there. And so Merck had to do a global review of practices before they could create a new plug-in to plug in the mainframe. A year later, the guy got himself an Apple II computer, and he had to bring it in secretly every day in his backpack and then carry it out every night in his backpack because he wasn't supposed to be using computers. The guy eventually got a phone call from a VC and offered him to fund a company that would use computers to research products and drugs. And he went and started a company called Vertex, long story short, and became a billionaire and did great things. The next example they used was the idea of the podcast was talking about how middle management sludge and bureaucracy can stifle innovation inside giant corporations. Synopsi sound familiar. Then they used an example of SpaceX as the alternative, and they talked about how SpaceX, purposely knows they're going to blow up the Starship when they did the first launch, and that it was hailed as a success. Then they had 3 analysts who I think were supposed to be space analysts. Like one guy ran a Bryce Tech. Sorry, Bryce. Not Bryce. But a company called Bryce Tech, which was a space and analysis company. And another one, it was like the guy's Smith. Sorry, Bryce. Space or something like that. But it was like a space. He literally had read a space consultancy. So they were talking to these analysts about 3 different analysts about SpaceX and their approach. And all of the analysts were like, yeah, we don't really know why they're doing Starship because there is no business model for it. Maybe it'll help them with their Starlink satellite launches. But yeah, Starship's sort of a terrible idea. And I was like, wait a minute. None of them talked about the idea, which we've talked about here, that SpaceX is not just using Starship to maybe go to Mars one day, which I fully expect in 10 or 20 years they will be, but they're going to use Starship to launch people and packages from New York City to Beijing in under an hour. And there's a whole other business case here. It's not like Starship is just for going to low Earth orbit and maybe the moon. It's that was in the comments. They were like, yeah, Starship is literally just a moonshot.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Analysts, with all due respect to analysts, I have many friends who are analysts, but with all due respect to analysts, they're good at telling you what's sitting in front of them and what happened before.
That's exactly what it was.
They
like.
are
They
not
literally were like,
prognosticators.
here's what we're looking at. None of them were like, here's what's going to happen.
You're not going to see a financial analyst, moonlighting as a futurist. Okay. They're just not wired to imagine the future. They can't get past the next earnings report.
Well, this has been a rough 5 minutes for Bryce. The company is literally called Bryce Tech. I made up the name Smith Space, but then Bryce's title is literally analyst. Thanks a lot, Ken.
It's not impossible.
And I consider myself an analyst and a futurist, so they're not mutually exclusive, at least in my own mind.
Well, let's just say they're
extremely, in my own mind, so that's a whole other story.
Rare. Let's put it that way. And none of them are working on Wall Street, to the best of my knowledge, right now at any major firms. So
we're in Carrizozo,
that's right.
Mexico,
that's different. You can see the night sky. That makes a difference. So
that's another question I got for you, Dan. I've been meaning to ask you. We're one last topic, and then we'll hop off. We're 30 minutes. And next week, I promise everybody, Ivana and I will get together, make sure I can share my phone, and if not, I'll do it on my computer. I'll download MetaMask
hit
on my computer.
Hit the videotape.
Somebody's going to have to host that one because I'm going to be on a boat. So.
Oh, come on, Cabana. The boat will have Starlink Wi-Fi. What the hell?
I'd be great. That'd be great. We'll also be dodging, I guess, a hurricane or two, evidently. But
nice.
So, yeah.
Cabana, is there any way that you could show Bryce how to use StreamYard then before you go, and he will help me show people how to do it next week?
Yeah, I think I can just add him. Just send me his email.
All right. Bryce at 10,000daysfun.com, but Bryce will email you. Dan.
Yeah.
I actually thought that article you sent, I don't remember what the title we just looked at Cabana, but it was about
I can find it.
Traffic management.
Night sky.
Yep.
And Starlink got in trouble a year or two ago when they first started sending up their constellation seriously, that a bunch of astronomers, which, you know, Dan and I both love looking at stars. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but it's an unbelievably cool thing to look through a telescope and look at Mars. But is it possible? Why are we not hearing about the interference that the satellites might or might not be causing when we look at the night sky and are using our astronomy observatories? Or the other question is, in 5 years, when we talk about there being 20,000 low Earth orbiting satellites for various purposes, and you got the Kuiper constellation giving broadband from Amazon, you got Starlink, obviously, probably, you know, 10 times more than anybody else out there with satellites. Is there a potential problem of us being able to look at Saturn peacefully at night and not have satellites zooming in front of it?
There could be. I think what the problem was for the astronomy community, and I have a couple of astronomers on the Planetary Society board who were very outspoken about this issue. I think it's a little bit overreactive today. I think it can become a bigger issue, but that's also why there are numerous orbiting space telescopes in development right now, because at the end of the day, there is no better place to do optical astronomy than outside the Earth's atmosphere, and that's where you're going to get all the best images and the best science done. So I think it will be an issue. There's still a lot of room between things in orbit. You know, the fact that we've got over 1 million pieces of debris, no one's complaining about any of that getting in the way, including all the stuff that's large. And the satellites are not large. Don't forget, a lot of these are small sats, CubeSats. They're not big. And no one ever complained about, even though the space station moves by at a pretty high clip, we're going to have a lot of stations in orbit. Those are going to be a little bit more of a deterrent if you're looking in exactly the right place at the right time, or where they're transiting. I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I haven't heard a lot of it lately. Planetary Society, we keep, talking about these things, but we also advocate, in these articles for, continuing to improve communications and get the technology up. So there's a give and take.
If you've ever seen a clip of an astronomer who records the International Space Station going by the moon, you have to slow it down. It's going 17,000 miles per hour by the moon. It's like this. You can't even you can't even see it.
It moves through the sky like a slow meteor, or shooting stars, we used to call them.
And the moon is this tiny little thing up there. It's not the whole sky. And so when it goes by, it's it's hard to find it if you're trying to track it. Yeah.
And most astronomical observations are not snapshots; they're time-lapse photography.
Here's the best idea.
Taken over hours.
Here's the second best idea I've got for a new business. I'm not going to tell you the first one. I'm working on it.
Okay.
The second best idea for a business is what Dan just described. Why doesn't someone design a constellation of space observing satellites that look out with giant cameras and infrared sensors and anything else, and goes around, and instead of looking through a telescope, I hate to say it, but I go on my computer and I'm like, let's look at everything out there in outer space without even atmospheric interference. It's just the most beautiful picture, and anyone can wikify user-generated followings and finding new threats of comets hitting the Earth and stuff.
If somebody wanted to make a business out of putting telescopes in orbit and selling access time, viewing time, it would be interesting. I think telescopes will become ubiquitous once we have installations on the moon. I think you're going to see a nest of them on the far side of the moon, because that's absolutely the best place, because you're shielded from the sun.
You
and
should
you'll
have said
see
Dark
something
Side
like
of the
that.
Moon.
But
Should've
if
used
you
Dark Side.
Pink Floyd,
Yeah, thank you. You
Um,
make the reference.
but one last thing I'll mention that we should talk about at some time. I've been having discussions with the creator and developer of a very interesting business case that I can't say a lot about, but I'll just give you 2 words: space elevator. And this is
Oh,
a
yeah.
this is a technology that's been around for a long time, and it's fascinating. You want to talk about transportation to orbit? Just imagine a 60,000-mile ribbon anchored on a ocean platform up into orbit 60,000 miles up in geo, where they can bring up tons of cargo every couple of days and send it out to the moon, to Mars, to Venus. Pretty wild stuff.
Dan, how many stories high would that be the equivalent of? 1,000, 3,000, 10,000?
60,000 miles. So around the Earth 2.5 times.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
It's over my head.
Yeah.
Forget my business idea. I'm going with this one. Elevators, space elevators.
Yeah, 100,000 kilometers long. This would be
Amazing. All right, guys. Peace, love, happiness. I appreciate all of your time and energy. I really will. Thank you. What a way to end. We will next week show you guys finally, if you can't figure it out, how to buy it. I'm going to pull up Pink Floyd as we enter. And number 1 song on
Dark Side of the Moon.
There we go. All right. Well, we'll go with Breathe.
Okay.
All right, before we get a copyright strike,
slow,
let's get
slow.
out of here.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh, how about the Great Gig in the Sky? Like the space elevator. The Great Gig in the Sky.
There you go.
Perfect.
There it is.
God bless. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
See you, everybody.
Ciao.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Giovanna.